You've clicked on to today's tropical tidbit for Friday, the 10th of August. Here in the Atlantic, we have the remnants of Ernesto over Mexico, now crossing after it moved to the Bay of Campeche, made a second landfall as a tropical storm, and is now about to move out into the eastern Pacific, where more than likely it will redevelop into a new system over on the other side and will meander around out there, staying alive but in the Pacific basin instead of the Atlantic basin. We have a tropical wave behind Ernesto, which is coming into the western Caribbean, not likely to be a big issue because of upper level winds, but you can see lots of thunderstorms and rain coming off of this because of an upper level low that it is getting entangled with. Our next system that we're watching is Tropical Depression 7, which has been classified out here in the central Atlantic. In many ways similar to Ernesto, coming in a little bit higher latitude, but a weak wave that's come in now, developed a little bit of a circulation, and is destined to get into the Caribbean here over the next few days, following in Ernesto's footsteps fairly closely. If we look over here, we can see the circulation. This is moving very rapidly westward again. Similar struggles to Ernesto are going to be all this dry air off to the northwest of the system, and to the fast trade winds and forward motion, which is going to make it difficult to keep this thing together for the time being. Also notice that it's part of a very large inverted V structure here in the central Atlantic, indicating that the broad nature of this wave in the atmosphere is going to make it difficult for significant development to occur, at least right now, and this will more than likely, if it gets into the Caribbean, start falling apart a little bit here. If we look at the model tracks, we see that these are a little bit spread. A lot of them take it into the eastern Caribbean here. Some of them try to take it north of the islands. I do think this is still a bit of a poleward bias, similar to when the models tried to take Ernesto north of the island chain, and I think the trade winds here will whisk this along and keep this into the Caribbean. I like the NHC's idea of staying on the southern part of the guidance here, and I decided to get a little fancy this morning, try out making a forecast map since so many are starting to do it. I generally agree with the NHC tracking here, staying on the southern part of the guidance, betting that this will stay weak, get whisked along by the trade winds, and stay in the Caribbean. And they'll probably find an excuse to name this Gordon at some point, and then it'll probably fall apart here in the central Caribbean and weaken for similar reasons as to Ernesto. And this isn't as robust as Ernesto was coming into the Caribbean, so it may have a harder time surviving to get into the western Caribbean here than Ernesto did, so it's even more possible that this just dissipates and becomes a non-issue for us after that point. However, if it does manage to remain intact, because it does have a decent mid-level signature, if this can come through the Caribbean, it is possible that it could become a sleeper and sneak into our lives in the western Caribbean and the western Gulf of Mexico down the road in the long range. This is the Canadian Ensemble mean 500 millibar height for day 9. What it's showing here is the wave signature, 500 millibars, getting into the Gulf of Mexico out of the western Caribbean, and over the last couple of runs, a lot of their ensemble members have shown low pressure redeveloping in the western Gulf in the long range, and the same kind of thing showing up on the GFS, though not as strong. This is the ensemble mean 500 millibar wind by day 7. The wave signature you can kind of see showing up here just east of the Yucatan, propagating west-northwestward towards the Bay of Campeche. You can see the high over southern Florida, wrapping the winds out of the southwest into the Gulf, and you can see there's competition in the eastern Pacific with monsoonal lows here, but the point being, this wave signature doesn't go away entirely on even the ensemble mean, and it has the potential to ride northward into the western Gulf of Mexico with time. And the only reason we really have to worry about this coming poleward is that the next wave coming off Africa, which ends up starting to recurve on most of the models, not developing as much as they were, but you can see it here on the ensemble mean if we zoom out in the central Atlantic, and the models have been consistently trying to recurve this by 50 to 60 west, and if it does, it sets up the idea that we have something recurving out here. We have high pressure to the west of it with a cell here, opens up the potential for a weakness over the western Gulf, which means that if there's moisture here, it can be drawn into the Bay of Campeche and perhaps try to develop something in the long range, but impossible to know for sure whether that possibility will be there during that time. But it's something to keep a close eye on because, again, these systems have been trying to develop when they get farther west and farther north this year, as we've talked about in the preseason, because of this El Nino. Very hard to get them going in the deep tropics. You see them developing as this one tries to on the model when it gets farther north, and Ernesto didn't develop until it got into the western Caribbean This pattern in general doesn't favor these until they get much closer to home. So we will have to watch this and see what happens with it. This is the wave that we showed recurving on the model in the central Atlantic, and this is getting quickly wrapped around with dry air coming to the Cape Verde Islands. Very impressive wave, but for that reason, it's far to the north. Lots of dry air getting quickly sucked into it. Probably not going to develop as fast as some of the models are trying to make it. So before, if it starts recurving out into the central Atlantic like this, could get some more moisture and get away from some of the dry air and try to develop a little bit more. But for now, not seeing this being a real threat to land, except for the Cape Verde Islands here getting some rare rains from this, and will likely recurve before it can get close enough to any land masses. These rarely come far enough west to threaten to the United States when they are coming off Africa this far north right off the bat. So overall, no immediate threats in the Atlantic Basin, but we do have the MJO, as you can see kind of over here with all the convection associated with Ernesto in the Western Caribbean, is starting to propagate eastward out of the Pacific, and so we're going to be entering an active phase for Atlantic development, and we're in the middle of August now, so in general the pattern favors developments trying to occur, but because of the pattern with the El Nino, the wind shear, and the trade winds, a lot of these systems having a hard time getting going in the tropics, but could be sneaky threats farther west and farther north in the long range, so that is what we will be watching for over the next week or so. Alright, that's it for today. Thanks for watching.